Welcome to Wrestling with History. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe as we continue to bring you the greatest stories in the history of wrestling. Vincent Kennedy McMahon, the most powerful man in professional wrestling, sports entertainment, or any other name you want to call it. McMahon is perhaps the single most polarizing figure in the history of the business. A workaholic with a ruthless, nearly sociopathic disregard for anyone who stands in his way. Vince famously bought the WWE from his father, Vincent James McMahon, in 1982. Never satisfied, Vince would continue to expand his wrestling empire, first buying up regional territories, then creating the spectacle that has become WrestleMania, which he'd bet his entire future upon, using the capital from the first event to pay off the loan he'd taken to purchase the business from his father and his partners. From dominating cable television, taking the company public on Wall Street, and then pioneering a move to streaming before it had become the thing to do in the entertainment and media world, Vince took his version of wrestling from local entertainment in high school arenas and public access television to become a worldwide brand worth billions of dollars. He survived scandals, lawsuits, indictments, and even assassination conspiracies. In the summer of 2022, there'd finally be a scandal that caught up to him, when it was revealed that Vince had several intimate relationships with his female employees who had been paid millions of dollars to sign non-disclosure agreements. This would force him into an early and involuntary retirement, at least temporarily. But Vince McMahon, as he always has managed to do, maneuvered out of what looked like his demise to return back to the throne of WWE, using his power as majority holder of the voting shares of WWE stock to force himself back as the chairman of the board of directors, threatening to use his stock voting power to prevent the approval of any new media rights deals for the company if he wasn't reinstated. Returning to the company in January of 2023, Vince would then orchestrate the sale of WWE to the growing media conglomerate Endeavor. Endeavor gave WWE a market valuation of $9 billion at the time of the acquisition. The sale was announced publicly on the day of WrestleMania that year. The WWE would merge with UFC under Endeavor Holdings. Vince was even able to retain his position as chairman of the board after finalizing the sale, collecting a multi-million-dollar annual salary while doing so. There's plenty that's been said about what Vince has done in his life, which milestone is the greatest, which scandal is the worst, as well as an encyclopedia's worth of personal stories from disenfranchised former wrestlers who were promised things they never received, coerced into working hurt, and put in potentially harmful situations. Still, many wrestlers speak of him as a father figure, looking up to him, even telling stories of him helping out struggling wrestlers financially, or covering the cost of rehabilitation treatment for those battling with addiction. When it comes to Vince McMahon, it's never just black and white, good versus evil. While he spent 40 years creating the content that's been etched into our psyches from a young age, including as himself, in on-camera roles for a significant portion of that, starting as a ring announcer for his father, then working as an over-the-top, absurdly voiced play-by-play commentator while not acknowledging on-screen that he was in fact the company's owner, but most famously as the character that would be a part of the most notorious rivalry in professional wrestling history, as Mr. McMahon, the idealized version of a cutthroat corporate boss who was looking to crush the working-class hero, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Vince would say in later years that during the McMahon-Austin feud, he viewed himself as the Stone Cold Steve Austin character, the one looking to stick it to the man, the regular guy. But who was really the man behind the titan of industry persona the world knows today? What life events led to his creation? Vince's young life reads like something of a supervillain origin story, and plenty who have crossed paths with him and his business dealings view him as just that, a super villain. However, to understand who Vince McMahon truly is, we must first strip away the facade that he has presented to the public. Strip away the nearly $3.5 billion net worth, the private plane, the palatial Connecticut estate, the Manhattan penthouse he once owned, and even Titan Towers, the newly rebuilt corporate office of his sprawling wrestling domain. To reveal the true Vince McMahon, we must peel back from this defensive shell of wealth, power, and fame he holds up to the world, and take a look into how this man came to be. Vincent Kennedy McMahon was born on August 24, 1945, in Pinehurst, North Carolina, the child of Vincent James McMahon and Victoria Hanner. It was Victoria's second marriage. She'd end up exchanging wedding vows 4 times in her life. Victoria was married to her first husband when she and Vince Sr. met while he was stationed in Wilmington, North Carolina with the United States Coast Guard. They had 2 children, with Vince having an older brother, Roderick. Vince Sr. had been discharged from the military in New York just 6 days before Vince Jr. was born after Japan surrendered to Allied forces after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending World War II. Vince did not, however, grow up as the heir of a wealthy and famous wrestling promoter. He grew up, during nearly all of his formative years, as the illegitimate son of one Leo Lupton. Vince McMahon was known for the first several years of his life as Vinnie Lupton. Leo was a truly sour individual, who is noted for the perpetual physical attacks he launched against Vince's mother. And in turn, when Vince would stand up to him to defend her, Vince would receive the brunt of the violence himself. Leo would beat Vince mercilessly, even using his tools and equipment to inflict further damage. The abuse he suffered during these early years shaped Vince's disposition in a way that would inform his future in many ways, including taking risks in business. He stated, "Taking numerous beatings and things of that nature, I developed a defensive philosophy that has served me well through the years. That is, if I lived through whatever the adversity was, I won. No matter what happened, if I'm still breathing in and out, I won. So if you have that kind of philosophy, then failure is not a big thing." Vince has always been known as a risk taker in business, though most of his forays into business outside of wrestling were not financial successes. This dates back to 1974, when Vince would max out his last credit card to fly to Butte, Montana to meet with Evel Knievel, leading to Vince promoting Evil's jump across Snake River Canyon. The event was a financial failure, with Vince and his wife, Linda, ultimately having to file bankruptcy in 1976. Linda was asked about the filing during a failed U.S. senatorial campaign launched out of Connecticut. She stated they paid for as long as they could on the debt, but it essentially became untenable and they were forced to file bankruptcy. Vince's philosophy of, "If I'm still breathing in and out, I won." It was true, and he continued to press on in spite of any failures he'd face. The blended family lived together in a trailer park in a segregated community near the coast of North Carolina. Vince stated that while the living conditions of the trailer park were not ideal, prior to that they had lived in a house that did not have indoor plumbing. They were bordering on the edge of homelessness, so it was still an upgrade. Certainly Victoria, Vince's mother, was not merely an innocent bystander amidst the storm of adolescent abuse that young Vince had endured. During an interview with Playboy magazine in the February 2001 edition of the publication, Vince gave his most revelatory interview on his upbringing. The interviewer asked if the abuse was merely physical, or if it was also sexual in nature as well. Vince stated essentially that yes, it was both. He went on to clarify, "That didn't come from the male." The interviewer then pressed him, "So it was from your mother, and this is why you are estranged from her?" Vince simply replied, "Without saying that, I'd say that's pretty close." The interviewer went on, "That's so mysterious. It sounds like a difficult thing to deal with." Vince then began a diatribe about not using your experiences and upbringing as an excuse, more or less a pull yourself up by your bootstraps speech. "Surely it must shape a person," Vince was then asked. Vince then gave a slightly deeper look into his psyche and answered back, "No doubt. I don't think we escape our experiences. Things you may have pushed to the recesses of your mind, they'll surface at the most inopportune time, when you least expect it, We can use those things, turn them into positive, change for the better, but they do tend to resurface. Chris Jericho said that when he was working a program with CM Punk in WWE, he asked Vince how he should go about insulting the lack of Punk's father being in his life. Vince immediately snapped back in his snarling voice, "Call him a bastard!" Is this how Vince viewed himself? Vince had even contemplated suicide during his youth, considering walking into the ocean along the Carolina coast near his home. The silver lining in this unfortunate childhood would begin to shine through when Vince was 12 years old. That summer, Vince would be reunited with his biological father, traveling north to Washington, D.C. to spend his summer vacation with his old man, seeing firsthand a way of life far different than he had been accustomed to in the Tar Heel state. Vince would also get his first taste of the wrestling business, falling in love with every aspect of it, though some may argue every aspect of it except for the wrestling itself. He was drawn to it from the first day he saw it, and his love of wrestling was truly spawned from his love and longing for his father. Vince was drawn to the larger-than-life personalities of his father's promotion, and that would be a hallmark of Vince Jr.'s influence on the business for the entirety of his tenures in charge. During this era, McMahon was drawn to one wrestler in particular, Dr. Jerry Graham, a heel, using dastardly tactics to gain advantages in his contest, but with a smile across his face the entire time he did so. Dr. Jerry Graham would light cigars with $100 bills. He was flashy, with red pants and a riverboat gambler shirt. He was known for running red lights and shouting at people on the street. Dr. Jerry Graham was the definition of living the gimmick. This new lifestyle gave Vince a glimmer of hope that there could be a future outside the struggles that had shaped him, although the relationship with his biological father was not seamless. Vince stated that his father would compliment him and at times show appreciation for him, but he would never state that he loved him. They both knew that they had missed out on 12 years, and that there was nothing that could be done to get those moments and memories that could have been back now. Vince has not openly expressed resentment towards his father for why he left him in the dire situation that was his first dozen years on Earth, but the conflicting emotions and their effect on Vince can only be estimated as significant at a minimum. McMahon would state, "There's a tendency to try to play catch-up, but you can't. You miss those years. There would always be something missing between us. There would be no reason to discuss it. We got very, very close, but we knew there was no way we could go back." Vincent James McMahon's promotion was then known as Capital Wrestling Corporation. The CWC was a joint venture between Vince Sr., Toots Mondt, and Johnny Doyle. It would become a full member of the National Wrestling Alliance in 1960, and would go by the name Capital Wrestling until 1963, when it would become the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, the precursor to the WWF and now the WWE. Vince would spend more time with his grandmother when he returned to North Carolina, a safe haven for him outside the chaotic home life his mother had fostered, but he would still end up getting into mischief, in particular, getting into fights. Vince acted out his aggressions in a way he understood as a child, with violence and physicality. Vince's mother, Vicky, was a singer in the local church choir, and one Sunday during the service, Vince's eyes were caught by another female in the choir that was not his mother, a buxom, blue-eyed girl, as Vince put it, by the name of Linda Marie Edwards. Linda was 13 and Vince was 16 at the time. Linda would go on to become Vince's wife and business partner, and the mother of his children, Shane and Stephanie. The Edwards home gave him a view of family life he had never experienced, even beyond what he had known staying with his father during the summers. Vince would attend Fishboro Military School in Virginia, enrolling just after his 17th birthday. The tuition was paid for by his father. At the school, Vince played football, with one of his peers recalling Vince as a good defensive tackle, aggressive, liked to hit, but had never played sports before. He struggled with the technique and didn't have the patience to learn it. Fishboro Military School is where the name Vinnie Lupton would finally be put to rest, as he enrolled as Vince McMahon, moving away from the namesake of one of his childhood abusers. His mother would also make a change, as just months before Vince enrolled at Fishboro, she filed for divorce from Leo Lupton, ending the saga between Leo and Vince for good. Vince once gave his final thoughts on his stepfather. "Leo Lupton, it's unfortunate that he died before I could kill him. I would have enjoyed that." After graduating from Fishboro Military School in 1964, Vince attended East Carolina University, majoring in business studies. He married Linda on August 13, 1966, shortly after she graduated high school. They graduated together from ECU in 1969, and by that point, she was pregnant with their son Shane. The adolescence of Vince McMahon reveals a great deal about why he is the way he is. Vince's idiosyncrasies, quirks, and eccentricities have shaped so much of how the world now understands professional wrestling. Much of these personality traits were centered around his need for control. A notorious micromanager, he was involved in every aspect of WWE, working 20-hour days. He put his personal touch into nearly all that he did. The list of unwritten rules that come with working in Vince's inner circle are fabled throughout the business. He despised sneezing, the concept of an involuntary act offensive to him. Also a bit of a germaphobe, he would order the same turkey sandwich every day for lunch, but wouldn't eat the part of the bread that his hands had touched. Vince also carried an electric shaver with him, trimming his facial hair wherever he was, in the car, in the office, in the gym. When asked why he wouldn't just grow a beard, he snarled back, "No, I can't let it win." His love of sophomoric humor and bathroom jokes would become a staple of programming during much of his time running the creative for the company. From Mae Young giving birth to a hand, or his Kiss My Ass Club where he would shove his exposed rear into the faces of those he was feuding with. His fascination with power and personal image would lead to an obsession with pushing muscle-bound wrestlers, whether they could work, had the hearts of the fans, or could deliver a believable promo or not. Vince threw his weight around in ways that often made the product feel infuriating to watch, as though at times he held a particular disdain for his own audience. It comes back to the way Vince views himself, and more importantly, how Vince wants to be viewed by others. Vince was famously resistant to using Southern announcers on his television programs. Many assumed it was because his product was so different from Southern wrestling and the aspects it used in its booking. But perhaps any allusion to Leo Lupton and the Southern accent he surely possessed calcified this avoidant behavior by Vince Jr. Raven, a former WWE wrestler, more notably known for his stints in ECW and WCW, said that every wrestling promoter has someone on the roster they personally identify with. He claimed that for Vince, that was the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, who would demean and insult those with lower status than him, using his wealth to cut corners and pay off those who stood in his way. And he also saw himself as Lex Luger during his mid-90s WWF run as the patriotic American with the perfect bodybuilding physique. The dichotomy of these two characters reveals an internal conflict brewing within McMahon, wanting to be at once both the hero and the villain. Ultimately, because of everything he's been through, Vince McMahon wants more than anything to be the one in control. Vince had, by chance, the perfect set of circumstances for him to become the media mogul he is today. As unfortunate as it is to consider, had he not had an abusive stepfather, he most likely wouldn't have his insatiable, unwavering drive to attain as much power, influence, and domination as possible. Or if he had not been the son of a successful promoter, he may have never had the opportunity to purchase a wrestling promotion, let alone one in the greatest media market in North America. But the hand of fate, however cruel it may have felt at times, delivered to Vincent Kennedy McMahon an opportunity and a series of hardening life experiences that would ensure success. Well, this comes with no guarantee. In the world of Vince McMahon, he doesn't offer guarantees, only opportunities.